It was our 15th wedding anniversary on that day. Having coffee with my wife after dining at the restaurant where I proposed to her, she dropped a bombshell. I've fallen for someone else. I know it's terrible to say this on a day like this, but I can't keep it secret from you any longer. I never expected that at the very place where I asked her to marry me. Fallen for someone else. She said nothing, just kept her head down. I was at a loss, looking up at the ceiling. But then, I suddenly realized she had been acting suspicious. My wife, who used to be frugal, started buying expensive makeup products and owning designer bags, one after another. And she would just leave them in our bedroom. Are those designer bags you have at home the gifts from him? And my question, my wife trembled. It seemed that was the case. I'm sorry, he gave them to me as presents. We were just friends at first, but we both realized we were serious about each other. I don't know if I'll end up with him, but I can't stay with you, feeling like this. The word divorce crossed my mind. She was in love with someone I never met. Didn't she vow to stand beside me for life's ups and downs? After her confession, everything seemed pointless. I felt like an idiot and didn't even feel like getting angry at her. Fine, let's split up. I don't want to know who you're in love with. I don't even want to talk to you. Don't you ever show up in front of me. My wife nodded silently at those words. I sighed deeply, took some money out of my wallet, and put it on the table. I don't want you coming home with me. Just go straight to your parents' house. I'll send all your belongings later. But I just need some time alone. I can't stand to see your face right now. Hearing that, my wife grabbed the money I left on the table. And she quickly left the restaurant. After she was gone, I took a sip of the cold coffee, feeling empty. She was someone I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, but sadly, I'll never see her again. She broke my heart and shattered it into pieces. That was the night I parted ways with the woman I loved. Soon after, I sold our house and moved into a cheap apartment. I used work as a convenient excuse for not taking care of myself. I would eat takeaways almost every night as I had no time to cook for myself. My shirts were always wrinkled as ironing was time-consuming. I would often sleep over in the office as I couldn't be bothered going home. One day, my boss, Bob, called me in his office. Listen, ever since your wife left, your life's been a mess. I'm sorry, maybe I should find myself a new wife. I joked in response. A new wife? All right, I'll find one for you. Actually, there is a girl I've been meaning to introduce to you. What? She's a relative of mine, a really nice girl. Wait a minute, please. Bob wasn't listening to me and was already making a call on his cell phone. Hello, Emily. Are you available to talk right now? I was stunned as Bob, even over the phone, cheerfully chatted with her in front of me. Great. Can you come over tomorrow morning? After hanging up the phone, Bob looked at me with a big smile. Her name is Emily. She'll stop by your house tomorrow morning. I've given her your address. Why don't you ask her to make breakfast for you? What are you talking about? Of course, it's not free. Bob started to tell me about Emily while laughing. She's been job hunting for a while. I told her she'd get paid by you for looking after you, so I'll leave it with you. Are you serious? That sounds like hiring a housekeeper. I felt dizzy at Bob's outrageous suggestion. But maybe he was just joking about finding a new wife for me. Yep, that must be it. She's a good girl, so if you like her, consider proposing to her. She's a very loyal person. She wouldn't leave you no matter what. Please, stop joking about things like that, I said to Bob, and then hurried off to the client meeting. After the meeting, I sent a report email to Bob, although I was exhausted. I'd dreaded going home. Maybe I'll stay at the office again tonight. Or should I find a cheap motel to stay at? As I was contemplating and walking through the streets, a young woman approached me. Excuse me, are you John? Yes, I am. And you are. Nice to meet you. I'm Emily, Bob's relative. She was the woman Bob called earlier today. Nice to meet you too. But how did you find me here? I was so confused that I didn't know what was going on. Uncle Bob told me you'd be around here somewhere. I happened to be nearby, so I thought I'd come to say hello. Looking forward to working for you from tomorrow, she said with a smile. I could only smile back wryly. Then, the next day, "Good morning, John." She appeared at my front door. Of course, I couldn't just send her away. What would Bob think if I did? So I invited her in and let her make me breakfast. It had been a while since I had homemade food. Wow, bacon and eggs. The bacon is perfectly crispy. I'm glad you liked the way I cooked it. She chuckled at my words. I looked at her and said, "It's been a while since I had proper breakfast. That might be why you enjoyed it so much." Thank you. I felt a sense of happiness and contentment. It's been so long since I've had such good food. You're just exaggerating. No, really. $10 an hour is not enough for this. I should pay you more. No, the current rate is good enough for me. But that doesn't feel right to me. At my words, she slowly shook her head. I'm unemployed at the moment. I can improve my cooking skills by doing this, and even get paid for it. So I couldn't, and I wouldn't ask for a pay rise, she said with a bright smile. By the way, why did you agree to look after an old guy like me? Her expression changed instantly. She turned her face away from me and gave a strained smile. That's because I just admire someone like you, John. That's nice to hear, but I could tell she was lying. Her gentle demeanor became rather tense now. I felt something wasn't right. Is there something you're hiding from me? No, not at all. After saying that, I'm sorry. She suddenly raised her voice. What's wrong? I had absolutely no idea why she apologized to me. The truth is, the man your ex-wife fell in love with was my father. What? My father left my mother to be with your ex-wife. Since then, my mother has been mentally unstable, needing someone by her side. I quit my job to stay home with her. I was at a loss for words. So, Emily was the daughter of the man my ex-wife fell in love with. Unbelievable. It seemed that her father disappeared soon after I had the last conversation with my ex-wife at the restaurant on our anniversary. What a selfish man your father was. Instead of leaving you and your mother the way he did, he should have had discussion with your mother and get everything sorted before he started a new life with someone else. I felt sorry for Emily, who was looking anxious. I don't know what Bob was thinking when he thought of her as my potential wife, but this was just too much. Why did you agree to do this? I wanted to apologize. Apologize for what? You haven't done anything wrong. She shook her head. If I had stopped my father from seeing your ex-wife, you wouldn't have had to go through the divorce. My mother always blames me for not stopping him. Tears rolled down her cheeks. At that moment, I found myself hugging her tightly. John, I'm sorry, but let me say this. Stop blaming yourself. What your mother says is wrong. It wasn't your fault. Thank you. She cried quietly in my arms. I was sad, but at the same time, I felt anger towards her father, who abandoned such a devoted daughter just to be with someone else and never returned. Emily, you didn't do anything wrong. The one who is to blame is your father. He should have taken responsibility for his actions. She looked at me weakly. I just don't know what to do anymore. My father's gone, and my mother blames me for what happened. You don't have to do anything. If it's too hard for you to be at home with your mother, you can stay at my place. Thank you, but I really shouldn't impose myself on you, she said hesitantly. That was when I came up with a brilliant idea. Would it be all right if I met your mother? My mother? Emily looked surprised. Yes, maybe your mother needs someone to talk to and to share her feelings with. I think I can help her out because I know exactly what she's going through." "You are probably right," Emily agreed. I was certain that her mother and I would understand each other very well. Or that was what I thought anyway. A few days later, I met Emily's mother, Sharon, and we talked about many things. I always knew it wasn't Emily's fault, yet I took it out on her. I never thought there would be someone out there who could empathize with me. When we're overwhelmed with our own issues, we tend to forget others are there for you. Sharon nodded weakly at my words. "Thank you so much for coming today. I shouldn't be staying home all day, crying and feeling sorry for myself. I may just start looking for work. That would be better for Emily too." "I agree. Maybe going somewhere with your daughter for a change of scenery would be good. She's been troubled ever since her father left." As we spoke, Sharon hesitantly continued. "I know it's a bold request, but would you be kind enough to take her out? I've hurt her so much that I should distance myself from her while I get my life sorted." Looking at her sad smile, I suddenly had an inexplicable feeling of sorrow. "I understand. If there's anything I can do, just let me know." "Thank you." She smiled at me. I smiled back at her. Emily continued to come to my house and help me with domestic chores. Not only that, we would go for a walk together to the nearby park and sometimes visit art galleries and aquariums and such. Gradually, she began to spend more time at my house. And we ended up getting married. I absolutely adore Emily. Sharon, who had reconciled with her, was very happy to see us together. Today, the kitchen is filled with the aroma of Emily's cooking. The sound of her chopping food with a kitchen knife was music to my ears. She happily said to me, "I never thought I'd be your wife." I'm surprised too, to meet and marry someone 20 years younger than I am. I thank Uncle Bob for his crazy idea. Without that, we wouldn't have even met each other. Yes, I do too. Bob introduced Emily to me, thinking that two people abandoned by their family or partner would be able to understand each other, and that could help recover from the pain caused by the desertion. But he never expected us to get married. Life is really unpredictable. Bob said, laughing. Maybe we should ask Bob to make a speech at our wedding. That's a good idea, Emily said with a big smile. I smiled back at her. I'm really looking forward to our wedding next month. Hey, what the heck are you going to do about this? You've got my computer infected with a virus because of you. Being yelled at by my unreasonable boss, I couldn't talk back and just waited for time to pass. Then, it happened. I'm going to have to cancel the $500,000 car I had asked you to order before. A quiet yet firm voice echoed in the showroom. I recognized the man who said this to my boss. He was an elderly man I had seen before, collapsed from heat stroke at a crossroads. You are off my case right now. The elderly man declared this. My boss's lips trembled. Little did he know that this incident would lead to a downward spiral in his life. I'm Matthew, a 28-year-old car life advisor working at a well-known luxury foreign car dealership that everyone knows. As a child living in the countryside, I used to admire the coolness and rare retro style of the classic cars I saw while walking to school. Around the same time, after watching a European car action movie, I got excited about the various cars' designs, speed, and the coolness of the actors driving them, and dreamed of driving cars just as coolly one day. Since then, I've been hooked on cars, secretly researching various classic and new car models on my home computer, eventually developing a particular interest in European cars. Initially, I just wanted to ride and drive them, but gradually my dream evolved into wanting to work surrounded by such cool cars. After graduating from college, my dream came true when I got a job at the American headquarters of a European car manufacturer. After a few years at a dealership in New York, my passion led to excellent performance. This time, I was set to transfer to a branch in a regional area for the first time. Tough break. When my transfer was announced, a senior had said this to me. "Bad luck. You're being transferred, right?" "Yes." "Have you heard about that branch?" "No." "What about it?" The branch I was transferring to was among the top in sales in the region. It's clear that the types of cars sold and their frequency differ between New York and regional areas. While working at my current store, it's possible that my performance might drop, but is it really as bad as being called unlucky? As I pondered, my senior leaned in, looking uneasy. "The branch itself is fine. It's just that the branch manager seems to be a difficult person." The branch manager. Apparently, there have been various problems, and new employees quit quickly due to this, leading to constant understaffing. Your transfer might be to fill in for a veteran employee who just left. I see. Turnover is high, and upper management knows it. But since the sales are good, they turn a blind eye. It seems unlikely the branch manager will be transferred anytime soon. Be careful. Thanks, I appreciate it. With a vague sense of unease, I prepared for my move from the headquarters to the regional branch. "My name is Matthew. I'm looking forward to working with you all." On my first day of transfer, during the morning meeting where I was introduced, I sensed a somewhat cold atmosphere. The staff did applaud, but it felt mechanical, lacking warmth. Having come from the headquarters and knowing what my senior had told me, I was somewhat prepared, but it didn't feel like a warm welcome from anyone, not just the branch manager. The notorious branch manager was named Ken, and soon enough, I was to learn the truth behind the rumors I had heard from my senior. "I'll be out for sales visits now. Take care of the rest." "Yes." "What's with that look? Got a problem?" No, nothing at all." Ken, intimidating one of the staff members, glanced around and smirked before leaving the showroom. When Ken's car was out of sight, I approached a staff member sitting at the neighboring desk. "Excuse me." "Yes." "Where did Ken go? Is there really sales visits?" "Oh, if you're going to work here, you shouldn't get involved in that." Ken just went to slack off. Slack off? Yes, it's usual for him. He dumps his work on his junior colleagues and is probably napping in some parking lot by now. He'll be back soon, though. Hearing this resigned sigh, I was at a loss for words. Is that really allowed? I didn't get any more details, but when I asked other staff members, I got similar responses. Apparently, Ken has been doing this for years, piling work on his junior colleagues while he slacks off. He usually returns around noon with a refreshed look, as usual. True to their words, Ken returned around 1 p.m. His face did indeed look refreshed. Back already, Ken? Yeah, did you finish what I asked? It's done, right? Sorry, it's not done yet. When one staff member apologized, Ken's smirking face turned angry. Not done yet? Are you kidding me? He suddenly raised his eyebrows and started yelling. I'm so sorry. I'll finish it right away. Geez, you're too slow. Think about efficiency. You were probably doing unnecessary stuff. Ken, hitting the desk with documents, intimidated the staff member completely. Tired of yelling, Ken looked around. And inevitably, our eyes met. Feeling a chill at his smirk, I casually looked away, but it was too late. I later learned that I was the only one who had looked up at that moment. Ken walked briskly towards me. How's the progress on the task I asked you about this morning? He asked. Yes, it's already done. I handed over the compiled data, which he took carelessly and skimmed on the spot. Then, laughing through his nose, he said, as expected of the elite from the headquarters, your work quality and speed are different, huh? Sarcastically, he returned to his desk. I am not sure he disliked that or not, but I soon became a target for Ken. Initially, I only took care of my own tasks, finishing them before Ken returned, But gradually he seemed to dislike that and started piling more work on me. Naturally, it was an amount of work that couldn't be finished just in the morning, and I was unable to complete it all, leading to days of being yelled at and pointed out. I knew I was being used as an outlet for stress. The other staff members didn't help me since they were not targeted while I was, and they even stopped making eye contact with me. No wonder newbies don't thrive in such an environment, and it wouldn't be surprising if someone quit at any time. But as just an employee, there was nothing I could do but bear the brunt of this injustice. One day, on my day off today, I was taking a walk in the neighborhood for a change of pace. The country air reminded me of my childhood, bringing a sense of nostalgia. The smell of the wind, the sound of the trees swaying. Being healed by the atmosphere I couldn't feel in the city, I enjoyed the scenery. But it was really hot today. Wiping the sweat that was beading, I thought about getting an iced coffee and bought one from a vending machine. That's when my cell phone rang, and with a heavy feeling of foreboding, I looked at the screen. As expected, it was Ken calling. Ken often called me, regardless of whether it was my day off or not. It could be a summons or snide remarks about the previous day's work. My days off didn't feel like days off anymore, and it was starting to get tough for me. Sighing at the call, knowing I had to answer quickly to avoid being yelled at, I reluctantly tapped the answer button and put the phone to my ear. "You're slow. Answer within 3 rings when I call." As expected, Ken made another unreasonable demand. While thinking that was too much, I bit back my words. "I'm sorry, what can I do for you? Just get over here right now." But Ken just said that and hung up. "Come over right now." An involuntary sigh escaped me. I knew it would be for some unreasonable reason, but if I didn't go, I'd just get yelled at more when I went to work tomorrow. I guess I have no choice but to go. Resignedly, I started walking towards the workplace and reached an intersection. There, I saw an elderly man walking unsteadily, clearly in bad shape. "Are you okay?" I blurted out and rushed over, just as the old man seemed to lose consciousness and was about to fall. I managed to catch him just in time, supporting his body desperately. Sir, can you hear me?" The old man's body was burning hot, yet he wasn't sweating at all. It was heat stroke. I needed to get him somewhere cool. Looking around, I found a bench in the shade of a tree and took him there. I only have the iced coffee I just bought, but it's better than nothing. I removed one layer of the old man's clothing and pressed a can of iced coffee against his neck. I really wanted to give him water, but there were no vending machines or convenience stores nearby. And I couldn't leave the old man alone to go buy something. "Hello, emergency services." "Yes. An old man seems to have heat stroke and is about to collapse. He's barely conscious, and I'm cooling him down with a can of iced coffee now." Yes. Understood. Please hurry." Having called an ambulance, I continued talking to the old man. "The ambulance is coming. Don't worry, you'll be okay. Please come quickly." While I was panicking about what to do next, I heard a voice. "Oh, what's happening here?" A lady who happened to pass by spoke to me. "Isn't that you, Thomas? What's going on? Do you know this gentleman?" Yes. "Is it heat stroke? Have you called an ambulance?" "We're waiting for it now. I really wanted to give him some water, but this is all I have." "I have some iced tea with me. Let's try giving him that for now." "Is that okay?" "Of course, and I'll contact Thomas's family as well." "Thank you so much." The lady quickly contacted the old man's family, and in the meantime, I gave him the iced tea she had handed me. "I'll let the family know as well. The ambulance will be here soon. Let's stay strong." As she encouraged him, the old man nodded a few times, though his consciousness was still hazy. A few minutes later, the ambulance arrived safely. I handed over the situation to the paramedics, thanked the lady, and then rushed off to work. By the time I arrived at work, it had been over 30 minutes since Ken's call. "You're late. What time do you think it is?" As expected, Ken yelled at me furiously, making me jump. No matter how much I explained that I couldn't leave the old man, I knew Ken wouldn't listen, so I just let his yelling go in one ear and out the other. The reason Ken called me turned out to be trivial. He said something was wrong with his computer and wanted me to fix it. The issue was basic, so I couldn't help but think how he could manage as a branch manager with such trivial complaints. "You can go home now," he said. Wanting to leave as soon as possible, I left the workplace without saying a word. Worried about the old man, I didn't go straight home but instead went to the lady's house to ask about him. Fortunately, he was safe, which relieved me. Although I was appalled by Ken's attitude, being able to help someone left me feeling somewhat refreshed as I went to sleep that night. Dreading another day of Ken's yelling, I went to work the next day only to find the workplace in an uproar. "What's going on?" "Matthew, it's serious. Something's wrong with Ken's computer." His computer. Ken was yelling all over the place, and all the staff were at their wits' end. Amidst this, Ken spotted me arriving and rushed over. "Hey, Matthew." "Yes. What are you going to do about this?" "Your fault, my computer got infected with a virus." "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb. You did something yesterday." "I didn't do anything." "Liar. How are you going to fix this?" As I delved into the details, it seems that after I left yesterday, Ken opened an email that had arrived on his computer. However, that email contained a virus that infected the computer upon being opened. As a result, Ken's computer got infected and stopped working. Ken was making a big fuss, blaming me because I had touched his computer the day before. Of course, I had no recollection of this, and what he had asked me was just basic operations. I hadn't even opened his mailbox, let alone sent him any mail. Everyone, including me, was just dumbfounded by his unreasonable behavior. But Ken's anger didn't subside, and his so-called lecture, more like baseless accusations, went on for a long time. It continued even past the opening time of the store, and he was yelling so much that some customers got scared and left. Something had to be done. But there was no stopping Ken's momentum. When I was at a loss, the store's door opened and two men entered. Ken, who had glanced at them, suddenly stopped yelling at me and approached the two men, fawning over them. "It's been a while. We've been waiting for you." However, ignoring Ken's greeting, the two men came to me. "Matthew, thank you so much for yesterday." It was the old man I had helped the previous day. "I've been worried. Are you okay?" "Yes. Thanks to your first aid, I was told by the doctors at the hospital that I could be discharged soon. I came today to express my gratitude." "No need to thank me. I'm just glad to see you're doing well." The young man accompanying the old man appeared to be his secretary. It turned out that the old man, a chairman of a large corporation, had been a customer of our dealership for a long time, both personally and corporately, favoring our brand. "I'm truly grateful that you helped an old man like me. In return, though I hesitate to call it that, I'd like you to handle my personal and company affairs from now on." "Me, really?" "Yes. I was moved by your actions yesterday. Your continuous care gave me strength. I would trust you," Thomas said with a smile. But hearing his company's name, I realized he was a prestigious client traditionally managed by branch managers. I, a newcomer, couldn't possibly take on such a responsibility. Ken, seeming to think the same, hurriedly intervened. "Excuse me, sir, but this man is a newcomer from the headquarters. He can't be trusted." "A newcomer?" "Yes. He might have some grudge against me. Today he even broke my computer. I was just lecturing him about it." "A newcomer? That sounds more like you, Ken." I've known Matthew since he was a child." "What? And I can't trust you anymore, Ken. Your yelling earlier, it was yours, wasn't it? I heard it all the way outside." That's not all. You've been late for scheduled times and changed the estimated costs and actual labor charges. You even replaced parts with new ones without asking and charged me a high price. I had to tolerate you because of the long-standing favor to you, but I felt like my precious cars were being held hostage. That is, Ken, it's not just your recent behavior towards Matthew, but I can no longer trust someone like you. The $500,000 car I previously ordered from you, I'm canceling it. What? Who knows what you might overcharge me this time? From now on, I want Matthew to handle my affairs. Step down from handling my account. Ken, clearly taken aback, fell silent. Sorry for barging in. You seemed busy. No, it was actually a relief. Thank you. After that, Ken left hurriedly, and I sat down with Mr. Thomas and his secretary. You said, you have known me since I was a child. This region was actually my hometown. But I had no memory of meeting someone as important as Mr. Thomas. His earlier words intrigued me. Forgot, have you? You used to come every day to admire my car, calling it cool. This revelation astonished me. Remember now. Are you that guy? Mr. Thomas was the owner of the classic car that inspired me to enter this world. Yes, I couldn't forget you. No other child showed such enthusiasm for my car. I'm sorry for bothering you back then. No, I was happy. Remember when you fell and cried on the roadside, and I happened to pass by? I drove you home in that car. Yes, I remember. You're remembering all that is amazing. Of course, I can forget your smile, being so happy just to ride in the car. I promised to take you for a ride again, but couldn't fulfill it due to being busy. Please don't worry about it. The fact that you let me ride in your car back then was a truly precious moment for me. That car was my starting point. It's the reason I wanted to get into this job. When I heard about the transfer from the headquarters to my hometown, I accepted immediately, hoping I might see that classic car again. I wanted to thank you for that time, but I was so focused on the cars that I honestly didn't remember your name and had no leads. But to meet you again like this, I never imagined it. It feels like a dream come true, and I'm so happy. Before I knew it, I was passionately speaking with tears of joy, and Thomas listened happily. Actually, I've been maintaining that car from back then. I still drive it to this day. Is that so? You should come and see it again. And to think, that boy from back then has grown up so well. It sure makes me feel my age. Mr. Thomas smiled deeply with a sense of nostalgia. Then, his secretary spoke up. Sir, it's almost time. Yes, Matthew, I'm sorry to rush, but I need to ask for your help with my car's maintenance. Yes, I'll check with the mechanics right away. Please wait a moment. I quickly confirmed with the mechanics and took the keys from Thomas. After handing over to the mechanics, the secretary came outside and spoke to me. Matthew, it's been a while. Don't you remember? We went to the same middle school. I'm Keith. Keith, from the basketball team. Are you that Keith? Yeah. The secretary was Keith, my senior from the basketball club during middle school. Back then, he was known as a bit of a troublemaker, but now he looked like a successful businessman in his suit, which surprised me. I probably wouldn't have recognized him if he hadn't said anything. Actually, it was me who sent that email to Ken's computer. What? I knew you had returned to your hometown. News spreads fast in the countryside. I knew Ken had been targeting you, so I wanted to get back at him. I sent the email just as Thomas was about to visit. He was so happy talking about how you helped him yesterday, so I carried out the plan thinking Mr. Thomas would surely help you. I'm sorry for using you like that. I was left speechless. It seemed I had been dancing on Keith's strings the whole time. Of course, Mr. Thomas doesn't know any of this, and his feeling unwell yesterday was genuine. I'm grateful you helped him. Thank you, truly. No, don't mention it. You must have been surprised when you came to work today. But don't worry, the virus was only meant to startle. It won't cause any real damage. It should be back to normal soon. I didn't intend to cause any harm to the company. Indeed, it was only Ken's computer that had been affected by the virus. Ken, thinking his computer was ruined, would surely be red-faced if he knew the truth. I shouldn't be proud of it, but after all the trouble he caused, Mr. Thomas was also quite relieved. Keith's mischievous grin sent a chill down my spine. "You haven't changed at all, Keith." "Is that so? Well, I've always been this kind of person." "Haha, I definitely don't want to make an enemy of you, Keith." "I'll take that as a compliment." Keith was always smart and loved pranks. I remember when our club coach unjustly scolded us and Keith ran off with his wig, leaving us all to face the consequences, but everyone felt better afterward. I've already informed the headquarters about Ken, so don't worry. We're working with our lawyer to refund the overcharges Ken made to Thomas. His future looks pretty bleak now. Seeing his cunning smile, I vowed never to cross Keith. Later, I learned that the good sales at our dealership were largely due to Thomas's purchases of personal and company cars. Ken losing Thomas as a client meant losing everything for him. Mr. Thomas told me he had no choice but to continue dealing with us because there were no other dealerships nearby, and he particularly liked our brand's safety and design. Especially that classic car he first let me ride in. He bought it with his first earnings and had a strong attachment to it. He was pleased to have someone admire it as cool and to have such a significant impact on that person's life. 2 years later, I was working as the branch manager of that dealership. Ken had quietly resigned at some point. "Do you want to know what happened to Ken after that?" Keith asked me, but I shook my head, not wanting any more involvement. Even though I was still new as a store manager, I felt that the dealership, which had been listless under Ken, was beginning to come alive again. "I'm counting on you." Receiving such encouraging words from customers who visit the store fills me with joy. Mr. Thomas has been coming every 3 months since then to maintain that classic car. Being able to see the cool car that inspired me to pursue this career again makes my work days more fulfilling. One day, Mr. Thomas invited me for a drive. The thought of riding in that classic car again makes my heart race, almost to the point of tears. Remembering me as a child, caring about a small promise made so long ago, placing trust and expectations in someone like me. All of these are blessings, things I shouldn't take for granted. I want to keep working diligently and sincerely to repay this kindness. As I step into the car that was my starting point, I make a vow in my heart. Congratulations on the adoption. So, you'll be taking care of the dotard, huh? My ex-wife, Melissa, seemed welcome to the idea of her father, Robert, adopting me as his son. "You're his son now. You have the responsibility of taking care of him." After dumping the responsibility of caring for wheelchair-bound Robert, Melissa disappeared the next day with Michael, who she had an affair with. With her gone, it was just Robert and me left. "Robert, I'm here for you. Let's get through this together." Then, he smiled slyly. "All right, so first, let's sell this house." I was dumbfounded. What was he thinking? My name is Edward. I'm a 35-year-old nurse working at a general hospital in town. Having lost my parents to illness early in life, I wanted to work closely with patients and entered nursing school after graduating high school. My life has been work-centered, but lately, I've felt the urge to consider marriage seriously. Many female nurses are working at my workplace, but I've never really hit it off with anyone. I always thought if I were to marry, I'd prefer a woman from a different profession, so I secretly registered a membership with a marriage consulting agency. Despite being introduced to several women, I never really clicked with anyone. Even if I felt a connection, the women would turn me down. Perhaps it's because I don't show much enthusiasm when thinking about living together. I was dumped quickly after splitting the bill on a first date. The staff at the marriage agency advised me, "Edward, the women who match with you usually expect a man to at least pay for the first date. Many of them want to be housewives after marriage." Getting married seemed difficult. It was quite a culture shock for me, who assumed it was normal for women to work even after marriage. A housewife, huh? Should I respect that desire? I'm worried I can't afford to provide a lavish lifestyle on my earnings. Men who are willing to accept a housewife are popular. You can consider a life plan where your wife relaxes at home for a few years after marriage and then starts working part-time for her own spending money. Taking the staff's words to heart, I decided to tell the next woman I met that I was okay with her being a housewife for a while after marriage. That's when I matched with Melissa, a 30-year-old. She's the same age as you, Edward, and she's youthful and energetic. I think you should seize this opportunity. The staff warned me that if I missed this chance, my future prospects might be bleak, so I decided to focus on Melissa. Once I met her, she was a pretty woman who had been a campus beauty queen in college. After she graduated her university, she didn't work but took care of her father, Robert, instead while doing house chores. The fact that she had no work experience bothered me a bit, but I didn't dwell on it. I not only paid for our first date, but also the following ones. Melissa had a strong desire to become a housewife, but I accepted that. As we dated, I was drawn to her easygoing and fearless personality. She seemed to like my serious nature. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and I eventually met her father, Robert. He was a farmer with extensive land and a house in the suburbs. Although he wasn't actively farming anymore, he had converted some of his land into a parking lot and was living off the passive income. Robert and I hit it off right away. He had lost his wife 5 years earlier and was living with Melissa. Having Edward here would be wonderful. I think Melissa, though a bit free-spirited, would make a good wife since she's always been helping around the house. The fact that I could spend every day with such a beautiful person gives me joy and motivation to my work life. Actually, the biggest reason for my decision toward marriage was that I was hitting it off with my soon-to-be father-in-law, Robert. When I proposed to Melissa, she happily answered, "Yes, I will." And so, I began married life with her, living together with Robert. For a while after getting married, she was a housewife, taking care of Robert and me. Then, a shopping mall opened nearby, and many stylish stores started hiring part-time workers. She immediately jumped in on it. A jewelry shop in the mall is hiring. I'd love to work in a fabulous store. It was unexpected since she wanted to be a housewife, but I had no reason to object. It's okay if that's what you like. We decided that she could use her earnings for herself, not for household expenses. Thinking about it now, I should have thought it through. Having passed the job interview, she started going to work with flashy makeup. My irregular work schedule meant we had less time together, but Robert stepped up to do the housework. After working the night shifts, he would welcome me home with hot coffee. "It's like I married you, Robert," I joked, and he laughed heartily. Melissa has been out more these days. She always loved flashy things. You might have some dissatisfaction with her, but I'll cover for it. Just be patient, Edward. I don't feel like I'm putting up with anything. I'm proud of her, but most of all, I'm proud of having a great father-in-law like you. It was the greatest blessing that I was getting along with Robert. I didn't tell him, but I gradually started to feel emotionally distant with Melissa. But I figured that's just how marriage is. Above all, Robert was a good man who I deeply respected. That alone made me grateful for this relationship. On such a happy days, one day, something happened. Robert suddenly collapsed while working in the yard and was rushed to the hospital where I work. I heard the news from the head nurse and hurried to Dr. Green's office. Dr. Green told me with a serious face, "Edward, Robert has been hiding his poor health. He's not strong enough for surgery anymore." It was essentially a terminal diagnosis. "Dr. Green, how long does he have? Even with you enhancing his quality of life as a nurse, he might not even last a year." I didn't know what to do and knocked on Robert's hospital room door. Robert understood his fate clearly. "Edward, how long do I have left? Tell me without hiding anything. I want to make the most of my short remaining life. You might not have much time to do what you like, maybe less than a year, but of course, I'll be by your side to support you as much as I can for your well-being." Then, he said something unexpected. "Edward, keep my diagnosis a secret from Melissa. If she knows I'm sick, she'll leave." "No way, she's your only daughter." "I'm sorry to say, Edward, but I can't trust her even though she's my daughter. If she learns I have only a year to live, she'll take all my assets and send me to a remote hospital." I somewhat understood what he meant. Living together, I gradually saw Melissa's true nature. She was a person who rejoiced at the sight of money. As a nurse, I'm not exactly high-earning. It seemed like she regretted marrying me. "I won't let her send you to a remote hospital. I'll take care of you until your last. Don't worry." As he requested, I kept his one-year prognosis a secret from Melissa. That night, when Melissa returned from her part-time job, I told her that Robert would now be living in a wheelchair. As he predicted, I didn't hear any words of concern from her. A life in a wheelchair. I'm not up for taking care of him. I'll quit my job and take care of Dad. Let's support him together. "No way. If you quit your job, how will we get money? I'm not working part-time to support the family." She stormed out and didn't come back that night. The next day, while I was wiping Robert's back in the hospital room, she appeared. She abruptly asked me for a divorce. I was dumbfounded. How could she make such a decision when her father was seriously ill? "If you're married to me, you'll have to take care of my dad, right? I want to free you from that burden." I've never once thought of caring for him as a burden. I have no problem working to support him. Don't think like that. Realizing my determination, she suddenly spewed unbelievable words. I hate this. Pretending to be a good person. I regret marrying you. If I had waited a bit longer to get married and started working at the mall, I would have met someone perfect." "What do you mean by perfect? I've found true love. I shouldn't have settled for a compromised marriage. He's entirely different from you. He's a director at a famous company." She elaborated further. "A man named Michael visited the jewelry shop where she worked as a customer. They fell in love at first sight. Michael owned property in the city and was quite wealthy. If she could marry him, she wouldn't need to earn her own allowance and could live a leisurely life as a housewife. The issue was they were both married, but as far as Michael was concerned, there was no love left in his marriage. He wanted to divorce his wife and marry Melissa. So I need to be single too. Edward, please divorce me." I was already aware that she had married me as a last resort. But such betrayal was still hard to accept. "What about Robert if you marry him? Will you take care of him?" "Of course not. I don't want to ruin my newlywed life with his care. I'll have him admitted to a hospital far away." "You're going to abandon your own father." That's when Robert spoke up. "Enough, Edward. Divorce Melissa. I'm ashamed of my own daughter. But without me, you'll be sent to a distant hospital." "Don't worry about that. I plan to adopt you as my son after you divorce her." At that moment, I vaguely understood his intentions. "Oh, that's not a bad idea. Then I can leave Dad's care to Edward and enjoy married life with Michael." I was astounded by her selfishness. "Edward, you don't have any parents. I want you to stay as my son." Melissa sneered mockingly. "That way, you can claim half of Dad's estate. Even if you try to exclude me with a will, I'll claim my rightful share." Melissa, always greedy for money, was sensitive to such matters. But she didn't know about Robert's one-year prognosis. She probably thinks estate matters are far off. "Michael loans a mansion in the city. I'll get part of his estate, so I can give you a little, Edward." A few days later, Michael showed up in the hospital room. Initially, I was angry but kept calm since we were in the hospital. When Michael saw me, he looked apologetic. "Edward, thank you for everything with Melissa. From now on, I'll make her happy. I apologize for her priorities, Robert." "I don't want to be called Robert by someone like you. Get out." I tried to calm down the agitated Robert. Michael stood there, enduring quietly. He had come knowing this might happen. He doesn't seem to be an outright villain. At this point, I even wondered if he was somewhat deceived by Melissa. "See, he's sincere, right? I really love him, so Edward, please divorce me." Regardless of Michael's feelings, clinging to Melissa after all this seemed pointless. Disgusted with her, I agreed to the divorce. "All right, I will divorce her, Melissa. After that, do as you wish." Things progressed swiftly from there. Robert, perhaps feeling he had limited time, was unusually active. I divorced Melissa and became Robert's adopted son. Melissa clapped her hands cheerfully. "Congratulations on the adoption. Now, you take care of the dotard." I raised my voice in anger. What a terrible daughter, calling your own father dotard, but my words meant nothing to her. "Now that you're the dotard's son, you have the responsibility of taking care of him. I'm glad I met a nurse, even if it came with a drawback." She left me with the responsibility of caring for Robert in his wheelchair and disappeared the next day with Michael. For Michael and Melissa to marry, Michael first had to finalize his divorce. Moreover, even after Melissa's divorce, she couldn't immediately marry another man. But such things no longer concerned me. I was determined to make Robert's remaining life as wonderful as possible. So, I wheeled Robert back home. Returning home after a long absence, he seemed relaxed. I tried to encourage him. "Robert, I'm with you. Let's do our best." Robert then grinned slyly. "All right, so let's sell this house first." I was taken aback. What was he planning? He began to convert his assets into cash one after another. He sold the land he rented as monthly parking in the unused farmland. A large sum of money began to accumulate in his bank account. "If I leave too much money, Melissa will take it all. I'll use my assets myself. Edward, will you indulge in an old man's whims?" I, now his son, had no desire for his inheritance. Robert's property was his to use, and it was fine if he spent it all. "I don't plan to leave any inheritance in this world. Edward, I'm going to enjoy my life to the fullest. That's what I want." "That's a great idea. Let's spend it all." "Thank you, Edward. I'll do just that." "What do you want to do, Robert? I'll be your hands and feet. Just tell me." He looked as if reminiscing something dear. "Well, I've lived a life without travel. Being a country man, I want to travel, preferably abroad. I thought it was a great idea." "Leave it to me. Let's go on a world tour." "That would be fantastic, but I'm getting weaker. I'm not sure if I can withstand a flight." "Don't worry, there are ways to travel the world even without much physical strength." I obtained his consent and headed to a travel agency. "Is there a luxurious cruise ship doing a world tour soon docking in the U.S.? The travel agent nodded vigorously and slapped his chest. "Leave it to me. I'll arrange the best cruise for your father." The travel agency and cruise staff promised to cooperate to make Robert's remaining days wonderful. A week later, I boarded a luxurious cruise ship at Los Angeles Port, backpack on my back, pulling Robert's wheelchair. The cruise ship was like a giant, moving hotel. Traveling by ship is entirely different from flying. There's no need to head to airports or book hotels at every destination. We usually relaxed in our ship's cabin bed and disembarked at ports for sightseeing. Clothing could be bought at shops we visited, so there was no need for a large suitcase. The ease of getting on and off with a wheelchair was my main reason for recommending a cruise. Whether to leisurely tour or stay on the ship, when not feeling up to it, we shared a suite on the cruise, enjoying the comfort together. Each day started with checking Robert's temperature and blood pressure. Breakfast was mostly through room service to ease his burden. On days we moved from port to port, we spent time on the balcony gazing at the open sea. For lunch and dinner, we dined in various luxurious restaurants on board. At night, movies, stage plays, and magic shows were performed. Every day felt like a visit to Broadway or Las Vegas. On sunny days, we went to the pool. Robert didn't swim but enjoyed sunbathing by the poolside. I eagerly applied suntan oil to get a tan. If Robert felt unwell, we simply relaxed in our cabin. Then my nursing skills came into play. The manager and the onboard doctor, who were aware of Robert's illness, assured us of 24-hour medical support. He could enjoy international travel without overexerting himself. For a while after starting the journey, he seemed surprisingly lively. He stepped out with a cane instead of a wheelchair when he felt good. From Los Angeles to San Francisco, then Hawaii to Australia. We became familiar faces to other tourists by dining at the same restaurant every day. Robert quickly made many friends with his warm smile. I'm traveling with my son for the first time, leaving the U.S. You have a dutiful son. My child seems to have forgotten us after marriage, so my spouse and I decided to live as we please. That's all right. Leaving an inheritance only causes disputes. Not just elderly couples, but wealthy young power couples and solo female travelers were among the passengers. One of them was Patricia, a lady in her 60s. She had elegantly dyed pale purple hair, who Robert got along with particularly well. She had lost her husband to illness 10 years ago and lived a lonely life since. My children told me to travel and relax. Gazing at the sea, I realized how much I fretted over trivial things. Robert, having lost his wife to illness as well, deeply sympathized with Patricia. They deepened their connection through the journey. The days on the cruise were peacefully unique. Free from rushing for flights. Watching the blue ocean from the balcony, Robert murmured, "When I turn to ashes, scatter me in the sea. Then I can travel the world forever." I nodded silently in agreement. The ship passed the Suez Canal, heading to Egypt, then Greece. Enjoying the contrast of white buildings and the sky in Greece, Robert walked alongside Patricia. I keep a respectful distance. The orange sunset dipped into the blue horizon. Robert gazed at the view next to Patricia. When he felt well, I entrusted his care to Patricia and did my own thing. Eventually, he began to tire more easily, and I acted more cautious. Some nights were tense, but often he would get better by morning. On Christmas night, he had a slight fever. Yet, he insisted on going to the dance hall because he had a promise with Patricia. I consulted with the doctor and got some stronger fever medicine prescribed for Robert. I borrowed a makeup kit from the ship's staff and used foundation to improve his complexion, so he'd appear more energetic. Dressed in a suit tailored in Italy, he looked like a charming gentleman with distinguished gray hair. Robert had learned some basic waltz steps from a woman performing musicals during the day. He practiced them while leaning on a desk. I'm nervous I might mess up. I hope she won't be disappointed. Don't worry, the exact steps don't really matter. We used a wheelchair to the elevator, but he walked slowly into the dance hall. Patricia, elegantly dressed, was waiting for him. I gently nudged Robert towards her. "Merry Christmas, Robert." "Merry Christmas, Patricia." As live music played, many couples swirled around dancing. Robert extended his hand and led Patricia to the center of the hall. His steps were shaky, but Patricia covered for him gracefully. That turned out to be their first and last dance together. On New Year's Eve, during the countdown party, I hurried through the ship's corridor, anxious. This ship had a stable internet connection, keeping us always connected to the US. Without a personal computer in my room, I used Captain Christopher's room. That day, I received a call from Melissa. After a long time, I find myself face to face with Melissa during a video chat. Her heavy makeup seemed a bit off, making her look older. "I had to search hard for you. When did you and the old man go abroad? I'm having a tough time here. Please come back soon. Returning might take a bit longer. Is it urgent? I'm fed up with this life. Michael divorced, but he gave most of his assets to his ex-wife, even the mansion downtown. Sounds like he's more honest than I thought. He separated from his wife on his own accord, so isn't it natural? That's not funny. We're living in a tiny rental now. I thought he'd have some stocks or something, but there's nothing," she exclaimed. Irritated, I urged her to hurry up. "If it's not urgent, can we talk later? I want to spend every second I can with him." "What's wrong with him? Bring him here. I have something to say to him too." At that moment, Christopher knocked and entered. "Edward, your father is." I understood immediately and closed my eyes. "What's wrong? Say something." Silently, I ended the video chat. "Could you please leave me for a while?" Christopher quietly responded with an "as you wish." Returning to the room, I found Robert peacefully closing his eyes, holding Patricia's hand. As requested in his will, I returned Robert's ashes to the sea. After everything ended, I bid farewell to the other passengers and returned to America alone by plane. At the airport, I was greeted by an angry Melissa. I heard Melissa broke off her relationship with Michael during my cruise. "So, you split without marrying. Must have been tough." But I knew she wasn't expecting such words. "You really turned everything into cash. Spending it abroad like that is the worst revenge on me." The inheritance Melissa was supposed to receive was thoroughly spent by Robert. Is there even a little left? Well, there is a small piece of unused farmland left. Just that land. Unbelievable. It won't even sell for much. Still, it's better than nothing. I'll renounce my inheritance, so you can do as you please with it. She trembled with frustration. To think this was once my wife, it felt strange. As I turned to leave, she shouted at my back. "Hey, what are you planning to do now?" "Just going back to my usual days." Thanks to Robert, I had the opportunity to travel around the world. I'm only grateful to Robert for sharing his dreamlike days with me. As for what happened to Melissa afterward, she sold the small piece of land she had left, but it didn't amount to much. At the jewelry shop where she once worked, she was criticized for having a relationship with a client and struggled to find re-employment. Her flamboyant behavior was well known locally, and even a supermarket part-time job rejected her. Now, she lives away from her hometown in an old apartment, working in building maintenance. The days I spent with Robert significantly changed my life afterward. I started working as a nurse on a cruise ship belonging to the same line as the luxurious one we traveled on. This cruise ship is used by many American passengers, so they valued a nurse who could speak English. I had a good working rhythm with a British nurse who was my partner. Working while traveling the world is the best. Robert gave me a great experience, which was more valuable than any inheritance. Inspired by his fulfilling final days, I want to live a life that I can look back on and think was good. Seriously, you're so useless, even though you're old. Lifting her beautiful willow eyebrows, my boss Catherine glares at me. Being lectured by a boss in her 20s is tough for a man in his 40s. I'm sorry, I'll redo it. Me, Ryan, holding the document with the air pointed out, bowed my head to her. With a huff, Catherine scolded me. Being a contract worker in your 40s is questionable enough for a man, but making repeated mistakes, what are you thinking? I'm sorry. My mom, who I live with, suddenly got hospitalized, and I couldn't do overtime. It's an excuse to have to work overtime to produce materials. And you are a third-class person who can't separate your personal life from your work life. That's why they call you a middle school graduate. Some employees chuckled in response to her words. But that's harsh. My father collapsed when I was in middle school. He had a stroke suddenly at work and was taken to the hospital, but he passed away soon after. My mother said, "I have enough savings to send you through high school, so go ahead and study." But I didn't. I disliked studying, but more than that, I didn't want to trouble my mother. I started working at a small auto parts factory. It was good that I worked there for many years, but last year, due to the recession, the factory went bankrupt. So, I reluctantly joined my current company as a contract worker. But I was not accustomed to using a computer, so the paperwork was very difficult for me. Even changing the font size was a struggle. And above all, my biggest challenge at this workplace is my boss, Catherine. Being targeted by Catherine. You're having a tough time, huh? No, I'm used to it now. Encouraged by Mike, a full-time employee, I forced a wry smile. Mike, over 50, is a regular employee and also my mentor. I was supposed to become the section chief, you know, but President Johnson forced his way. Oh, I heard the rumor. Catherine got in through connections, right? Exactly. She's President Johnson's niece. It's too weird for such a harsh young woman to become a section chief within a few years of joining, don't you think? What can I say? I muttered vaguely, but inwardly, I thought that might be the case. It's not just me. Catherine is known for being tough on her subordinates. The gossip hits the nail on the head. She probably knows she lacks the skills and is taking out her irritation on the employees. I secretly think so. What are you talking about? Just then, unfortunately, Catherine came over while we were talking, snapping me back to reality. No, it's nothing. Oh, I know. You must have been gossiping about me. You were probably talking about my connections again anyway. Catherine snorted and glared at us sharply. No, that's not what we were talking about. Mike tried to offer a polite smile, but Catherine kept glaring at us without moving. Both of you, an extra hour of overtime. Got it. Yes. I've mentioned that I can't do overtime. Isn't your mother hospitalized? The nurses are there to look after her, so you don't need to assist, right? Her words sparked anger in me. I don't want her meddling in my mom's affairs. Plus, I've told them that I can't do overtime. Acting all high and mighty, what's her deal? But I swallowed the rising emotion and, looking down, said to her, "Understood. That's better." She snorted at me and walked away. Man, seriously, what's her deal? Mike, I'm fine, really. But the way she said that, we were bad-mouthing her too, so I guess it's fair. While shaking with anger, Mike tried to smile, and I quietly lifted my head. That's right. I can't let myself be beaten by the bullying of such a young girl. I can't quit my job now, not just for my mom. My mom had collapsed a few months ago. The doctor said it was due to overwork. Years of her straining herself suddenly took their toll on her. Well, that's what happened today. Sorry, I come to visit and all I do is complain. No, it shows you're working hard. Just let it all out. Visiting me at the hospital, my mom always had kind words for me. To avoid worrying her, I absolutely can't quit my job. I don't have time to listen to the snide remarks of a 20-something girl. Let those who want to talk, talk. By the way, about Emily in the next room. The girl you've taken a liking to, right? Lately, her sister's been too busy to visit. She seems lonely. I'm a bit concerned. Mind if I go check on her? Is it okay if I join you? Yes, of course. Emily is a high school girl hospitalized in this hospital. Bored, my mom had met her in the hospital hallway, and they quickly hit it off. Emily is really honest and adorable, but it's tough for her. Her parents are ill. Well, she's having a hard time. As we walked down the hallway, my mom told me about Emily. And we arrived in front of her room. Emily, how are you? Oh, hi, my sister just came to visit. Oh, is that Susan? Thank you for always taking care of my sister. Hearing that voice, I was startled. It was a voice I recognized. But surely not. Catherine. We looked at each other, our eyes wide with shock. Because there stood Catherine herself. That girl is my sister. Catherine and I were talking in the hospital waiting room. We couldn't have had this complicated conversation in Emily's room, and besides, I didn't want to show my mom that I was being scolded by a younger boss. So, your sister is hospitalized. Yeah, she needs another surgery because of complications from an accident. An accident. When she was little, she had a car accident coming back from an amusement park with our parents. I was home, busy with my thesis and was safe, but, so your parents are? As I asked, she looked down and shook her head. My dad is still bedridden in the hospital. My mom's in a wheelchair, and I take care of her. So, you've been working non-stop for your sister's sake. That's right. My uncle, seeing our situation, hired me through connections. Oh, but I earned my position as section chief through my own efforts. Yet, all you guys do is gossip, which really gets to me. She clenched the can of coffee she was drinking. I'm sorry. I didn't know your situation. Well, at least you're honest enough to apologize. I smiled wryly at her words. But I was surprised to find out that the Susan who Emily admires is actually your mom. I had no idea that the Emily my mom cares about was your sister. That makes sense, she said, taking a sip of her coffee. My mom has been working herself sick since my dad passed away. I didn't go to high school to help her. Now, at my age, I'm just a contract worker. I laughed bitterly at my own situation. She listened to my story, her face turning pale. I didn't know that you had such a hard time. I'm sorry. I thought you just didn't like school and didn't go to high school. I didn't like studying, but I would have preferred to go to high school. It was tough even becoming a full-time employee. She smiled wryly at my words. Then, she looked at me earnestly. I've always been frustrated by the gossip and took it out on you guys. Even though I've worked hard and got promoted, everyone just says it's all connections. I felt like no one acknowledged my effort. But I'll stop now. There are probably many like you, Ryan, struggling in ways we don't see. Everyone's so busy they tend to only see the worst in others. Maybe you're right. After our conversation, my view of Catherine changed completely. She must have been desperate to protect her family. With her father in a coma after a car accident, her mother in a wheelchair, and her sister needing surgery for complications, Catherine's life must be incredibly tough. I couldn't even begin to imagine. And yet, she worked hard and became a section chief. Catherine might be an amazing person. I felt a bit ashamed. I hadn't been doing overtime because of my mom's illness, relying on being a contract worker, maybe even avoiding working hard. She must have been tirelessly pushing forward despite her difficulties. But surely, that made her blind to her surroundings. Maybe you should take some time off. That's not an option. It would trouble my uncle. He hired me out of kindness. She would eat lunch at her desk without leaving, working while eating, staying late at the office every day, always busy. No, maybe Mr. Johnson wants you to rely on him a bit more. Why do you say that? Since I'm closer in age to Mr. Johnson, if I were him, I'd want you to depend on me more. I shared my thoughts. Then she cheerfully said, you know, advice from someone older does carry a different weight. Ah, you're back to your usual self, Catherine. Oh, really? Was I off before? Yes. You seemed down earlier. Well, I was upset with myself for blaming someone in the same situation. It's understandable I'd feel that way. She smiled sadly at my words. But you've reflected on it now, right? If only reflection could make everything okay. Don't worry, being aware of oneself is important, I said, smiling at her. Somehow, that makes sense to me. Just the wisdom of life experience. We looked at each other and laughed. I had always thought of her as overly assertive and tough, but maybe a woman needs to be that clear-cut to grab a position in her 20s. And perhaps that stubbornness was necessary to overcome her difficult life. From that day on, Catherine changed remarkably. In what way, you ask? Hey Ryan, there's a mistake in this document. I'm sorry. I've corrected it for you, so be careful next time. Thank you. While she still pointed out mistakes firmly, she began to offer subtle support. Man, what's up with Catherine lately? Mike asked me, looking concerned. Who knows, something must have happened, I said, smiling at him. And there was a change in me too. Hey, have you thought about attending an online university? But I haven't studied for over 20 years. That's exactly why you should do it. It's never too late to start. You're right. Thank you for the advice. Each time I visited my mom's hospital, I ended up talking with Catherine, who was visiting her sister Emily. I took your advice and leaned on my uncle a bit, and he said I could use my paid leave next week. That's great to hear, and I'm a bit happy you took my advice, Catherine. Don't get it twisted. I only listened because you're more experienced in life. Is that so? I said with a wry smile, finding her suddenly resembling a normal girl in her 20s. At that time, I couldn't imagine she would become my life partner. Hey, about tomorrow, after dropping off Mom at the daycare, could you deliver some pajamas to my dad's hospital? Sure, I'll do that, and I'll pick up Emily from her part-time job too. Thanks. Then I'll go get mother-in-law's medication. From then on, Catherine and I began seeing each other not just at work, but also at the hospital, growing closer as we talked more. After I graduated from an online university and changed jobs, I secured a full-time position. Last year, we bought a house and now live together with her sister. My mom was thrilled to suddenly have 2 daughters. Catherine has become much calmer now, with a kinder smile. Sometimes I miss her old fiery spirit. Next year, we're going to have our wedding. No longer just a boss and subordinate, but husband and wife. I'm determined to make her happy for life, and today, like every day, I'm enjoying our busy life together.